In this episode of the Wild Party podcast, I'm thrilled to introduce Christine Law, the innovative founder of Flora Gelateria, a plant-based gelato business that's capturing the hearts and taste buds of San Francisco. Christine's journey from a corporate career to a passionate gelato artisan is a story of dedication, sustainability, and a love for creating delicious desserts that everyone can enjoy. In our conversation, we dive into the challenges of building a sustainable business in the food industry, the unique techniques that Christine uses to craft her gelato, and the growing trend of plant-based desserts. Christine shares her vision for Flora's future and the importance of sourcing local sustainable ingredients. So whether you're a foodie, an entrepreneur, or someone who's interested in plant-based living, this episode is packed with insights and tasty inspiration. Let's get this party started. Welcome to the Wild Party podcast, where we celebrate the visionaries behind vegan, ethical, and sustainable business. In each episode, we'll dive deep into their journeys, uncovering the why behind their mission-driven business. I'm your host, Stephanie Lahart. Tune in with me for passionate discussions about overcoming challenges, innovative marketing strategies, and the power of using business as a force for good. So whether you're an entrepreneur seeking guidance or a conscious consumer wanting to support impactful brands, join us as we explore the stories behind the businesses that are changing the world for the better. Let's get the party started. Welcome to the show, Christine. I am so excited to talk to you. And I have to say, it's kind of perfect timing considering we're having a heat wave in many parts of the country, including where we are in California. And you have a very tasty and frozen treat that is now your business. And that is something I think we all want for our livelihoods. It's like, let me do something fun and cold and tasty on this very hot day. So welcome to the show, Christine.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
I was excited to bring you on board for the podcast because we have so much to talk about, including, you didn't know this, but we have a common background. I also went to Penn State.
Fantastic. I talk about a great place for ice cream. Their short course in ice cream manufacturing has been around for over 100 years.
Well, that's funny because, of course, I didn't even know they had an ice cream course. I didn't go for ice cream myself. I went in communications, hence why I am now in the podcasting world. But you've had quite an interesting career because you've worked with some of the finest restaurants in the Bay Area. And then you really focused more on pastry and desserts. Is that correct?
That's correct. I got into cooking and baking as a child, and by the time I got to, sort of the age when you start thinking about higher education, um, I just offered to work at the local Marriott hotel. And then they said, oh yeah, we could use some extra help. I was like, just give me anything. I'll be the dishwasher or whatever. I just wanted to get started. And they said, well, they need some help in the pastry department. And that was actually how I ended up really specializing in pastry. And then I went on to go to school just for pastry, and beyond that to specialize in ice cream and gelato.
Yeah, so I mean, okay, so I already know a bit of your backstory and I don't want to reveal too much because I want you to, but not only did you decide you were going to, specialize in gelato, but you're now doing the plant-based version. So why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about where that came from, why you decided to start focusing on plant-based gelato specifically?
As I said, I had this pastry professional training and worked in all of these fine restaurants where I made everything, from all types of ingredients, from it, plant and animal sources. And over time, I had various health problems, and it came to learn that I had a dairy allergy. So I'm actually also allergic to gluten and eggs. So that wipes out a lot of the ingredient options for traditional pastries. I took a break from the industry for 10 years and pursued something else because I was just like, that's it. It's over for me. And all along, it still is my passion. It's still what I love doing. And thankfully, with the awareness that's being raised about plant-based and the importance that it has for the future of our planet, I really thought like I could do some good here. I could take all my talents and I can channel them and I can make a plant-based gelato that is, as good or better as anything with traditional dairy. And so that's what I set out to do.
Yeah, and that's what I'm hearing, from so many entrepreneurs like yourself, that their discovery and then their actual journey always starts with a personal story. So for you, it was because you had this dairy allergy and you're like, oh, well, what can I do to actually create then a product that people like myself could also enjoy? And hey, it happens to also fulfill this need now for people that are living a vegan lifestyle like myself. Because let me tell you, I am a girl with a huge sweet tooth, huge. And one of the things that I really did, at the beginning when I decided I was going to totally cut out all animal products was like, I can't eat donuts. I can't have ice cream, right? But I was very committed to it. So I wasn't going to be one of those people like, oh, that'll be the thing that I'll cheat on. I'm like, no, I'm just going to, stick with it. And now I feel like the industry has really caught up and are serving the more plant-based community saying, hey, we're going to create these products. And not only that, like yourself, you're realizing, you know what? There's also a reason to do this for our planet because we're finding that sustainably we can't live the life that we previously did. Farming animals is not sustainable. Besides the cruelty aspect of it, it's not sustainable. It's destroying the planet and it's not what people want anymore. So when I find entrepreneurs like you, I'm like, oh girl, you're going to make me gain weight. You are because I just want to eat sweets all the time. But you've taken it a step further because I know you're really, really interested in making sure that you're working with local farmers as well. And, that people really know where their food comes from. And that's important.
Yeah, that's so true. And we have a very large farmers market here in San Francisco at our Ferry Plaza, and it's for decades now has been at the forefront of education about where our food comes from, and it's a place where chefs and farmers and the public can all come together and get local delicious food. It's run by an organization called Foodwise, and I've been volunteering for them for a couple years, and now I'll be selling there, weekly on Saturdays as a vendor. And so I feel like this is the perfect place to, continue this message with my own product that it fits so well into the whole attitude and the whole awareness that we all need to have around these topics.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's important that we understand where food comes from, whatever aspect that it is. And I think we're so far removed from certain things as consumers that we don't even know, and we take it for granted. And I think I read in one of your recent Instagram posts that you were saying, if we know where our food comes from, there'll be less waste.
Oh yeah, when you see where when you see the work that gets put in to farming, and especially like these small farmers who are doing so much of it by hand, and you just and also just how delicious, and precious it is. It's like you don't want to waste it. No way.
Absolutely. It's like you're like, oh, if I know exactly where everything's coming from, I think just being more aware of it just makes people a little bit more conservative. I know myself. So you are actually creating everything from scratch, correct? Like you're doing the whole milk process yourself. What does that look like for you?
In the pre-interview, one question you asked me about is like what are some of the challenges for being a small producer? And so I currently do not make my own nut milk. However, I do um, take a very clean label nut milk that's just water and nuts essentially. And then I make my own gelato mix, which for people not in the business, you may not be aware, but most people buy, whether it's, plant-based or dairy mix, most people buy a mix already made because it has to be pasteurized. Um, and then they add flavorings to it and then they churn it into ice cream or gelato. That's a typical process in this country. And I went ahead and I got a pasteurizer's license so that I can, take the nut milk and add the ingredients I want to make a delicious, creamy, flavorful gelato that tastes, better than dairy. and then I can make that myself and then churn it into the ice cream. So it's a lot of extra labor, but it's also a lot of extra care and control on what my final product is, and so that I feel good about everything that's in it, and it's not something that's just, I buy in a gallon and add some flavoring to and dump it into my ice cream machine.
Since sustainability is such a core part of what you're doing, how do you balance the handcrafted nature of the gelato with the sustainable practices? So do you have to make batches that you're immediately then serving and selling, or are they refrigerable, or what is the difference, I guess, what I'm really asking, between like a traditional method as opposed to what you're doing now? Does it limit you, or are you just seeing it as like just a different step process?
I feel like my methods are they're probably they're more aligned with the Italian tradition of gelato making, because the best gelatos in Italy are made fresh daily, in the shops by the artisans. This the gentleman I mentioned, Giacomo Schiavon, like he makes everything fresh in his shop. If he's using hazelnut paste, he grinds his own hazelnuts, and it's all just there. And then it's churned in special equipment, which I have, that makes the texture and the temperature just right for the best delivery of flavor and creaminess. So I feel like my methods are a little more aligned with that, but because it is more handcrafted and artisanal, it's more time consuming. It's the labor of love.
Well, I do find that I think anything worth having these days, there is a little bit more labor in it, but it's more fulfilling, And again, going back to, being so far removed from the food products that we eat, it's like you almost don't appreciate them as much. Whereas when you see somebody, crafting something that takes a little bit longer, it feels more special, right? And I'm sure
Mhm.
your consumers and your customers have already, given that feedback back to you, that it's, tastes better, and they're more excited by it. But right now, so the level that you're at, you're serving predominantly the San Francisco farmers market area, correct?
I'm just about to start actually at the markets. I've been doing some special events and private events, and where this month I'll be starting at that market I mentioned, and hopefully some others too. So, like any startup, there's challenges with receiving equipment. I'm waiting on a cart from Italy, and going back to sustainability, what's amazing about this cart, and it's the kind that they use in Italy, is it's the gelato is held in containers that are surrounded by a cold, like kind of freon like liquid, and so it can operate without power for a long time, and it maintains the cold, and it maintains the gelato at a perfect temperature for scooping. um and so I can save on energy. I also really save on waste, because I don't end up with the freeze and thaw cycle, which ruins your ice cream over the course of the day, and so you end up throwing away what's left at the end of the night. And so obviously I don't want to have any left at the end of the night. I make small batches. My intention is to sell out, but it does just hold the quality, and so that everyone can have like freshly churned gelato as it's intended to be, and without waste and without extra energy usage.
Yeah. So would you say that that's one of the biggest challenges from what you've been doing, is just figuring out that whole how to keep it cold, but at the right temperature? Because gelato is special, it's way different than what just throwing it in the freezer. So has that been just a challenge overall?
It is, but I have to say that in my 20 years as a pastry chef, I have just run the gamut with that challenge, and had all the trial and error, so that when it came to doing this project, I was like, I'm ordering the special card from Italy. I'm not dealing with melted ice cream. I'm not dealing with rock hard ice cream. The consistency is so critical to the delivery of the product, as well as to the bottom line. Like I said about waste, I'm not going there. I've been there, done that. So that was
Yeah.
it was what's the word, like no compromises on that deal for this venture.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. So, I want to backtrack a little bit, because you've had such an interesting career. What made you at this point in your life or your career say, you know what, I want to launch my own gelato brand? Like I want to start this business venture. what was going on in your life that you're besides the dairy allergy that you're like, hey, I want to do my own thing.
I mean, I've been very lucky. I've always worked, well, not always, but I've mostly worked for smaller entrepreneurs, small business owners. And so I have really gotten to learn from them and see, what that lifestyle is like. And I've never had like sort of the corporate type job really. So it's always sort of been my way. And then just you wear so many hats, and you're mopping the floors as well as being the executive, and that really suits me. I don't know anything else. So to do this on my own, it's more of just like, it's still kind of a new thing. Like I can't just go somewhere and work for somebody else who's doing it. There's not enough people doing it. So that's where I was like, I've got to take this on. I know how to work like this. And I know how to make great plant-based gelato. So, you know, let's do it. And I'm at this point in my life too. I did try doing more of, I guess what I would call it, like a desk type job for the past 10 years. And it's like, I just can't do it. I have too much energy. I love to run around. I love to be, serving the people, interacting with the people, and the community. I need that. That's what keeps me going.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I've been an entrepreneur for pretty much all of my career, and I love the excitement of it too. I love figuring things out, and I can tell that about you too. You like to
Mhm.
figure things out, be a problem
Definitely.
solver, and it's fun. It's interesting. I never zone out
Every
on my
day is different.
days.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's great, and it's like I said, you are in a very specific niche because you're in the dessert world. So I know you started as a pastry chef. You were working in these restaurants, and you said that you were baking from a young age. But what else was it about the dessert experience that made you say, "I really want to focus on that"? Is it because desserts are celebrations?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I too have a vicious sweet tooth. I mean, unrelentless. So that I think is how I came to practice making so many desserts even before I went professional. I think I went professional so I would have an outlet for all these sweets, so I didn't have to like eat them myself and my family. We had to like spread the love.
I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. I never bake because it's too labor intensive. And personally, I hate to measure. And I found very early on when I was in grade school attempting to make brownies, which I really just ruined so badly, in fact, that my family still talks about it,
Oh
that
no.
baking is something that you really have to pay attention to and you have to measure specifically. So, is there a little bit of like an internal chemist in you, a little scientist that really loves the process of that?
Definitely. And you'd be surprised how technical gelato is and ice creams. Like I have these spreadsheets, and you really have to nail these formulas and have just the right proportions of ingredients. But for all of that, though, like people don't think about that part, and it just the smiles on their faces, like it's the joy, like you said, the celebration. Dessert is happy time. Like, so who wouldn't want to be involved in that? People are always their eyes light up. They're excited to eat sweets because it's either a celebration, or it's community, or it's something special when we have dessert. So that's definitely why I felt the return from making desserts was greater than if I just made a really good soup. But I like making soup too.
Yeah, I definitely. But like I said, for me, I'm like, I'm not going to measure that. I'm not going to pay attention either. I'm just not.
Yeah.
I'm more of like a throw everything into an instant pot kind of girl and just see what
Hmm.
comes out. So I appreciate people like you that are willing to take the time and energy to do all the measuring, all the chemistry, all the science, and be like, this is what it is supposed to be like. And
Yeah.
I love that you spend so much time, like I said, figuring out the sustainable option of it too, because that's that's important. We have to know at this point. So let's talk a little bit more about your entrepreneur journey because, it is a challenge when you're
Mhm.
deciding like, hey, I'm going to create my own gelato line to actually making it happen. So how were you able to figure out, well, where do I source the products for this? How do I get a cart made in Italy? Where did all that knowledge come from? Was that your previous restaurant experience?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and especially with regards to sustainability, because so just to talk about the ingredient sourcing, right? It's so much different because I had the same values in the restaurant. So I would in the restaurants as well. I would, buy from local, buy from farmers, get everything direct, make small batches. But then when you start getting into the plant-based, there are some ingredients for gelato in particular that I have to source, and maybe I have to source it in greater volume than I would have in the restaurant. And so then it does get to this, sort of choice you have to make, like, okay, well, I'd like to buy this locally, but I can't get it locally, or I can't get it in this volume, or so I've really had to re-educate myself on a lot of the sourcing for like the mix ingredients. I still use local ingredients that I buy right from that farmer's market where I operate. I go direct to the farmers and get all the flavorings, all the figs, the plums, the coffee, like whatever ingredient I'm flavoring, I get it direct from them. But the sort of the base mix, that's sometimes a little more challenging. Like I want to use regenerative farm sugar. Well, it's in Florida, so that's not really local, but so it's like these trade-offs, I suppose. So that's challenging. With regard to Italy, I went last October to the Dolomites. They have this convention there. It's a gelato convention. It's the oldest one there is, and it's in the Dolomites in the winter. And I learned so much there about, equipment and technique and ingredients. And then they had artisan gelato chefs from all over the world coming in and demoing their best flavors. And so I learned so much there, about the equipment and whatnot. So that helped me, inform my choices for the equipment as well.
Mm-hmm. And are you seeing a big push like over in Italy for more plant-based desserts too? Or were you kind of I don't know, just one of few instead of one of many?
I was one of few, and okay, well, this is an interesting story because I was, but I wasn't. So I talked to this one supplier there who had some products that were intended for plant-based gelato makers, and he was asking me. He was like, how do you think I can get my product out there more in the United States or in these other markets? Because he said his product was made entirely for other markets. He said in Italy, nobody eats plant-based. Their gelato is like sacred. Like nobody wants you to mess with the gelato. That's not to say that you can't find it there, but it's more for, say, the tourists who come along, but he says that the Italians, no, they want the real thing. There are no compromises. Now, this is one man's opinion, but he is in the industry, so I thought that was interesting. But they recognize that around the world there is this, this change, this shift that's happening. And then, so he says all this, but at the same time, the worldwide competition that they were having, the flavor that they had to make was a water-based chocolate uh, gelato. So every country was making, a non-dairy chocolate gelato and being judged on that for flavor and everything. So I was like, okay, this is happening, this is happening. And it was great. It was great to see everybody all amped up about that. So
Yeah, so he was very sure in his opinion, but that was just his opinion. Because I can tell you just from all of the interviews I've done and the business owners that I've met across the world, there's huge pushes for plant-based, not only desserts, but just foods in general. People are just, making different choices now, whether you
sure.
live a vegan lifestyle or not. So I think it's always whatever your personal, I think, belief is, you think that that's the world belief. And then you sit there and
Well,
say, absolutely.
and I think definitely there's plant-based everything else, but he was still making it sound like, but gelato is sacred, you know. But I'm here to put that to rest. I'm like, no, we're changing that too.
Okay, since you brought up flavors, since I've been, stalking your Instagram since we first started talking, I did notice, and then from your website, that you have a strawberry flavor that you do, and then there's some flavor where you have a chocolate that's mixed in and broken in. Like, where are these coming from? My mouth is literally watering as I'm talking about that chocolate one. I want it so bad. And please, when are you coming to LA?
Hopefully soon. Yeah, no, there is one of the most traditional flavors in Italy is the stracciatella, which is essentially chocolate chip. But the way I have a special machine, which is the one that you see in that video on my Instagram. And so what makes it unique is you drizzle the melted chocolate in the machine, and then the machine breaks it up into these, beautiful shards of chocolate chip. Um, and that, with a lot of the more commercial equipment that's not small batch, you can't really do that. You have to use like an extruder or some other sort of mechanical equipment to sort of like force the chips in there. And so they're just a completely different eating experience than when you have these hand drizzled broken chocolate chips, and that's like what you get in Italy, and it's the same equipment that I'm using. So right now I'm actually doing a coffee chip. There's a local coffee. It's called Cento Coffee. I use their coffees small batch, another really small business owner, and then I do the same technique and do the chocolate chips and the coffee ice cream. And wow, I think that one's my favorite. I just have that in the morning sometimes instead of coffee, and it gets me going.
I am
So,
definitely coming to your house so I can enjoy that coffee deliciousness in the morning as well. I've become a little bit of a coffee addict myself recently.
yeah.
So, okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the entrepreneur journey because I'm still really interested in, it's one thing to be like, have a passion idea, like I'm going to create a business from gelato. But then, it's another thing to be like, okay, I'm going to actually make this a business that, is going to be around for a couple of years. So, do you have any idea, like, where do you see your business going in the next 5 years? Like, we're starting with a cart at farmers markets, but what could that potentially look like for Flora Gelat? Am I going to say this right again? Gelateria?
Gelateria. Yeah.
Gelateria. Sorry. Flora Gelateria. What does that look like for you maybe in the next 5 years? Or do you want to stay just in the local farmers market areas, or do you potentially see yourselves, I don't know, franchising in the next 5, 10 years?
Hmm. I don't know about franchising just because I'm so hands-on, but I do. So, so the farmers market is sort of a prelude to brick and mortar.
Hmm.
That's the intention, because it's hard working like in a I make my product like just in like a commissary kitchen, and then I bring it to the markets. And so there's so much more I could do, especially with my pastry chef experience. There's such more breadth of operating offerings I could have, um, if I had a brick and mortar shop where things are a little more a la minute, like they are in fine dining, right? So um, that's something that's my initial, this is the stepping stone to that. Um, I do though want to see pints available, like in maybe boutique retail outlets or small grocers. That's something may, it kind of depends. I'm going to see how this rollout goes. What might come first? What is it better to, because real estate in San Francisco is just so ridiculously expensive. It's one of the most expensive places in the country, if not the most expensive to live and, rent and work. And so I just have to see what kind of reality that is, for brick and mortar. And I'm still working on the financials and whatnot. But if getting it into some boutique retailers ends up being a sustainable, on many levels, practice, that might be okay too. But I don't want to lose the connection with the customer. So maybe I would do that, but still do markets and things like that. As because I do believe that the markets, given the plant-based nature of and the local nature of my product, I still think it's important to be there because like that's where I belong. You know, that's where my product placement really is with that customer and in that market.
Yeah. So when you've been at these farmers markets and people, come up and meet you and you tell them about the gelato, has there been any kind of like skepticism from the consumers like, oh, I don't really want to try this? Or what's the general feedback that's been, given to you since when people try the gelato?
It's really funny because the demographic a little bit, I think the younger demographic is way more open to these things, way more open to the plant-based and the just alternative eating. And it's not so hard to get them to try. I think the funniest reaction is actually been some of my chef friends and colleagues who, I was, for better or for worse, right? I was kind of forced into this position. I ended up with these allergies. I can't eat or cook with whatever I want.
Mhm.
And they still can. So when I would say to them, oh, hey, yeah, I'm launching this plant-based, they just sort of would look at me like, well, why would you want to do that? Or like, why would somebody eat that when they could have regular gelato? Or they just didn't really believe in it. And then when I had them try that, they were just like, oh my God, this is so good. Like, I don't even know that there's no dairy, like if you make it, like I know it's going to be good, so it's just it has to sort of speak for itself a little bit, I guess, but that's why we have tasting spoons and samples and to convert the non-believers.
That's true. So it all goes back to the tasting challenge. It's like once you taste it, you're like, oh yeah, I want that. Um,
Right, yeah.
and
And
like
then
I
like a
said, for
lot of
me,
things you can try before you buy, so
yeah.
there's a lot of things you can't, so you have to just kind of take a risk, but there's no risk, only reward.
Ooh, that's a good tagline. No risk, only reward. But not so in the entrepreneur journey. We both
Well,
know there's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of things you have to figure out. Like I said, you being obviously a natural born problem solver, you like it. But what advice would you give to other entrepreneurs that are thinking about starting out, a business, whether it's gelato or something else? What would be your biggest piece of advice for someone who's suddenly like, I think I want to start my own business? What would you say to them?
it has to be all consuming to a point, I think to really, like I've opened a lot of restaurants. Like when you open a restaurant, like I would work for 5 months straight with no days off to get the restaurant open. And it's kind of like having a newborn, all those, anybody who survived those kind of processes without incidents, or who handled it, then I'd be like, yes, you can handle this. But it's the same kind of thing. It's just like, the newborn's crying. It doesn't matter how much sleep you've had, doesn't matter, what's grandma's birthday, whatever. And same thing with opening a restaurant. Like it's all you focus on. And so I think to launch it, like that has had to be the same um attitude and mindset that I have. But I know that even though it will continue to be challenging, it will level out at some point, and it will become its own thing, and I'll get to, you know, maybe not be running at the 125% I'm running at now. But I like that. I mean, I know what I'm signing up for. So I guess that's my advice is don't be naive.
And also what I'm hearing is you really have to have a passion for what you're doing.
Yeah, and I feel like that's a word that people throw around a lot. So I was about to say that, but then I didn't say it because I'm like, I don't know, I feel like that word's getting a little diluted, because it's passion, but if I mean, I guess that's what it is if you're it just, you know, if you have a newborn baby, like you love your baby so much that you go through it anyway. And so it is the passion that keeps you going, but it's doesn't change the fact that it's like so much work and not enough sleep and all of that, all the dedication and tirelessness that you must have. So
That's true. That's true. But
Yeah,
again, I think it's just more like, we're all going to work on something. Let's work on something that you truly want to work on. Like for me,
right.
honestly, as weird as it sounds, I have a huge passion for digital marketing. Like I love it. I love figuring out the processes. I love figuring out how to do, the right programs and packaging for the businesses that I'm working with. And specifically, my business this year has really started focusing on only companies that are in the ethical, compassionate, sustainable brands like yourself, because I'm like, there's all these great products and businesses that are starting. And because I have this skill set, I'm like, I want to make sure they succeed. So I set a goal for myself this year. I'm going to help 100 businesses scale and build revenue,
Wow.
within the next 5 years, because I love it. And it's weird when I tell people, I'm like, I love marketing, because sometimes people are like, oh, marketing, but I love it. So I think it's the same with you. It's like you have to love the process. You have to love the science and the chemistry and the thought behind gelato in order to be able to be the one that I'm going to start this amazing business. Because, it's not easy. You're like, have a new product, you have a new idea. And also, it has to be
And you have to
kept
do
at a
marketing.
certain
Yeah.
it has to be kept at a certain temperature. I just want to, impress that upon people, because I myself, I do this all the time. I'll find something I love, whether it's a gelato or even a water ice. Okay. Cause I grew up in Philadelphia, and
Oh, yeah.
you buy a huge amount of it because you're like, I want to have this later. And then you put it in your freezer and it's nothing like it because it's not the right temperature. And then you were like,
Yes.
oh, I gotta enjoy it in the moment. So I think also what I want to leave our audience with is gelato is something that has to be enjoyed in the moment, as your life does. Would you say that's true, Christine?
I would 100%. And that's totally going back to the brick and mortar too. It's like you if you send people home with pints, it'll be like what you just described. So as much as I'd love to see it on shelves nationwide, it's not going to be the same as that in the moment experience. And that's also the celebration and the joy is that moment. So like let's do it together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can't think of anything better. Like I said, I cannot wait until maybe, I don't know, I'm up in the San Francisco area or you come down in LA, because I would love, love, love to try it. But I have to tell you, you've been one of my favorite interviews simply because I'm such a sugar addict. And you're like just hitting all of my dopamine sensors right now. It's like we're having a great conversation. I'm thinking about gelato and everything behind it. And it's plant-based. And I love that as well. So Christine, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. But listen, I'm not the only sugar addict out there, and I know people would love to find out where they can find you. So why don't you tell our audience where they can find you online, where they can find you in person, and yeah.
I will be on Saturdays from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the San Francisco Ferry Plaza Farmers Market. And then I do have Instagram. I'm at Flora SF underscore gelateria. Um, I do have a website, www.florasf.com. There's no purchasing or pre-ordering or anything on my website, so it's just sort of information. So it's better to go to Instagram or come see me in person for the latest updates and flavors.
Absolutely. Like we just said, gelato is something you have to experience in person, meet Christine in person. And I will make sure that we have all of your links in the show notes. So anyone listening to this out there, they can start tracking you online, figuring out where you're going to be, and make you a part of maybe their vacation plans when they're coming to
Oh,
the San
definitely.
Francisco area. Like, we have to go there. Because, that's a thing now. It's like you plan your vacation around all the places that you have found on Instagram. Have you heard of this
Mm-hmm.
Instagram vacation? So
Oh,
we need to,
yes,
we need to
yes.
hook you up with some of these travel companies to make sure that you are in the party planning process of all of that, because I want
Oh, I love
everyone to
that for
enjoy
sure.
it.
Thank you. Yes, that's a great idea.
Well,
So
thank you so much, Christine, and hopefully we will get to see each other in person soon.
I hope so. Thank you so much for having me, Stephanie. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Wild Party Podcast. If you're an entrepreneur or professional who would like to be on this podcast, please visit boomtownmarketing.com and click on podcast. We believe that every business has the potential to change the world for good, and we want to support our community to help make the world more ethical, compassionate, and sustainable for all future generations to come. And if you're looking to build your business, no matter what level you're at now, request your free marketing consultation. at boomtownmarketing.com and click Get Started.